Hello, YouTube. So, Frontier Developments announced today that patch 2.3.01 will be delivered sometime in May. And I have to say, with just overall how 2.3 has been handled, this is the reaction from a lot of your player base, Frontier. Unfortunately, this is the impression a lot of people are getting with 2.3 in general. Instead of things improving, it's like it's much more of the same. And if that's the case, why should we care at this point if you're going to show a propensity for not going back and improving and fixing things you've already introduced in a half-thought-out, broken state? And this really drove it home. This is from David Braben's AMA. This is from Braben himself. When asked about multi-crew roles, he said there are quite a few other MC or multi-crew roles we could add. Let's see how big the take-up at multi-crew is once 2.3 is out in the wild. Well, the problem is if you deliver something that's half-baked, missing critical functionality like the ability of Helm to control what systems they control versus the gunner, as well as it's just kind of a broken, buggy mess, the uptake's not going to be great. We've seen this before with PowerPlay and CQC. Their responses of why they haven't gone back and improved upon these existing game systems? Well, with CQC, the answer is, quote, the player count means it's not a high priority, I'm afraid. Well, that's because it had low payouts as far as things. No other additional things like cosmetics that could be unlocked. Therefore, and also the broken matchmaking and other problems with things like that were not gone back, revisited, and improved over time is the reason why you have low uptake. And then PowerPlay, we have talked about it a great deal internally, but we need a good solution, something we don't yet have. If only there was a 25-minute video on YouTube that would explain a way in which you could combine the BGS and PowerPlay into a system that makes sense and allows people to grind everything at one time. That would seem to be a good idea, according to the comments section. Maybe y'all should look at it. And then they go on to talk about other features that could be coming, and again, more non-answers. More mining will come, but not until a future season. Well, Season 3, Season 4, Season 10? Same thing with SRVs, but in another future season, and yet they were kind of hinting there would be more SRVs this season, perhaps, and that doesn't seem to be on the thing. And if you're not going to go through and improve what's already there in any meaningful way because uptake isn't what you like it to be because it's poorly thought out to begin with and poorly implemented and bad design, why should we care anymore? Because it seems like you guys aren't. And this is coming from the top down now. I've been very vocal, and I still am, that Sandro Sammarco, the lead designer, needs to be relieved of his duties, moved on to another project, maybe go on to another company. Because he doesn't seem to get it. And whether or not some of these things are coming down from on high in regards of tying his hand, yes, maybe that's not entirely fair to him, but if you can't make a convincing argument or can't convince senior project leaders, not other designers, but producers and the project leads and stuff like that, that you need to go back and revisit some of these things instead of just the newest, latest feature we can sell microtransactions for, then maybe it's time to get a fresh voice in there that maybe could tell them in a different way. Maybe they need to hear it from multiple people before they finally get it and decide, well, maybe it's just not one person's opinion. And sometimes that has to happen within the internal politics of an organization. That try as you might, you can't convince those above you because they feel that you have a preconceived bias or whatever it may be. Maybe they do need to have fresh blood in that to give them a different perspective or give them a slightly perceived different perspective that's telling them the same thing. I've seen it happen in my own career. I've been brought in on 2 projects before to give basically another opinion, and sometimes it's been things that leaders have been told before, but until they hear it from somebody else, they don't listen. And that's why I say that there needs to be a new designer. I don't have anything personally against Sandro Sammarco, other than his body of work here seems to be falling down at this point. And it's driving away your customer base. And again, I don't think they're going to necessarily see this until it impacts the bottom line when Season 3 rolls around. Because if they don't change their ways and they go to charging on a per price or per feature basis, a per dot release is its own $10 or $15 add-on. At that point, because people are going to be expecting to buy a completed product, if something was released in this half-assed of a state, the sales aren't going to be there. And unfortunately, I have a feeling this would feed back into their own feedback loop of, well, nobody bought it, therefore it must not be popular, instead of looking at this and going, why aren't people buying this? it is as though they don't ask these basic marketing questions. The questions they should be answering or should be asking themselves isn't that, oh, well, CQC doesn't have a high turn-up, so let's not spend the resources on that. When you start to see 2 or 3 subsequent features that have low uptake after, say, a few days, a few weeks, a couple of months at most, and then suddenly drops off, shouldn't you be asking why? That seems to be a fundamental business question that whenever I would see things like this in products and companies that I owned, ran, that was always that was coming out of my brain was, well, why isn't this? Why isn't this being used the way that we thought? And whenever we were confronted with data like that, we go back to our customers, or in some cases our customers' customers, and try to figure out why. What is it that we're doing wrong so that we can change the process or improve upon it so that everybody has a better experience? And it doesn't seem like that's being taken into account here. Now, I'm sure that they'll be able to spend it and cost of stuff, and with additional IPs and stuff coming out down the line, from a company perspective, I think they'll probably be okay. Again, up until the point where they run up into that wall, and usually when this happens, when you're dealing with a company or a business arena where there is significant cash outflows in between major versions or seasonal sales and things of that nature, you run this very high risk of, let's say Planet Coaster back of envelope calculation made a profit last year of £8 million. That's great, but if you spend that £8 million, maybe you spend £10 million to build their next IP, if that's Planet Safari, and then you go out and Planet Safari fails to sell enough copies to break even for whatever reason, then you start to have problems. And usually that's what happens. You have these prior successes, and then you release a new version of something, and the uptake isn't what you thought it was going to be. And there can be various reasons for that. I've seen that in companies, again, that I have personally run, that will release a new version and then spent all this time, effort, and money, and then sales are way below expectations, and go talk to the customers, and a lot of times its answers like, yeah, but what we have right now does the job just fine. We're perfectly happy with it. Why change? And, those can be things that aren't always necessarily taken into account. And, I've seen it happen firsthand. And suddenly you go from being a profitable company, which was bleeding cash every month, to, oh shit, we're in financial trouble, let the layoffs and pink slips flow because that's the only way we can trim our budget fast enough to save the company. I've also witnessed other companies that by the time they made the mistake, it was too late. They didn't have the cash reserves, or they had whittled down their cash reserves, and suddenly they were out of business or bought for pennies on the dollar by another firm. So it's one of those things that I've seen this happen before firsthand. And this is why people are like, Frontier did release financials this week, I think for their year over year. And they had pretty good looking financials, and they had expectations of even being better next year. And I'm sure with the PlayStation sales coming along here, that will be a nice cash injection. But the point is, if you continue to put out substandard products like this, eventually it's going to come down and bite you in the ass. And I'm sorry, 2.3 has been substandard. There are a number of game-breaking bugs. There are certain bugs that you can ship that are of minor annoyance, things like your Hollow Me character disappearing during hyperspace transitions. While annoying, yes, frankly, if somebody hadn't pointed it out to me, I would have never noticed. But is it game-breaking? No. Xbox users unable to get past the main menu? Yeah, that shit is game-breaking. And the fact that you're not going to release a patch to fix these things until May, they said early May, 2, 3, 4 weeks possibly after the release of this broken, buggy mess, tells me one thing. Your beta needed to be 2 months long. You needed to make sure that this shit was fixed before you patched to live or pushed to live. And there were a number of problems with the Beta 5 beyond just the payment issues, which that's personal opinion. I'm talking glaring technical bugs that were left not addressed. In fact, I was one of the people whenever they were basically pushing Beta 5 to live going, I am absolutely shocked that maybe Beta 5 was the feature lock, but there wasn't a Beta 6 or Beta 7 in which they went back to resolve, or at least attempt to resolve some of these bugs. And I don't know. It's just one of those things that it appears as time has gone on, they've gotten worse. It'll be interesting to see if CIG here in a couple of months ends up finally delivering on many promises and hype that they've made over the course of years. I'm not exactly confident in them either, because I've seen this one before too. I've seen this pattern before too. Hype it up, and then what's delivered is kind of meh. So, I take anything that they say with a tremendous grain of salt over there. But that would be ironic, because, if you'd asked me 2 or 3 years ago, especially 3 years ago, I would have said FDev was on track to do things the right way. And what happened to Frontier?